go to Kate in the new timeline, where the Halliburton case was placed above them in the storage compartment. But remember, in the original timeline, Edward Mars was told that it would be stowed in the luggage case in the crew cabin. It's still not known how it ended up underneath a passenger seat. Hurley is recognized as the owner of Mr. Cluck's Chicken Shack by Arts, the guy who goes boom in season 1. But in the original timeline, Hurley is not well known as the owner. He tells Sawyer that nothing bad ever happens to him, that he's the luckiest guy in the world. But as we all know in the original timeline, he always remarks on how unlucky he is, how he has a curse upon him, and how bad things happen around him. Now look here, Saeed's holding an Iranian passport, but marked Iraq as the country of citizenship on the U.S. Customs Declaration form. We know from season 1 that he's from Iraq. Locke's reading the safety pamphlet, whereas in season 1 he dropped it and couldn't reach it. We also see Frogurt here sitting between a Boone-Locke sandwich. He doesn't seem to mind. Locke talks to Boone about his experiences on the walkabout, but in the first season, he was told in Australia that he couldn't go on the walkabout. Later, after this episode, though, the producers said that Locke was lying to Boone. Boone mentions that his sister Shannon refused to return to LA with him, but she did and was on the plane in the original timeline. Supposedly, this was because the show couldn't get Maggie Grace to return because of her busy schedule. Also, Michael and Walt aren't shown on the plane either, which they were the first time around. Charlie attempts to swallow a bag of heroin in the restroom in the tail section of the plane, but it lodges in his airway. In the original, however, he goes to the first class restroom to use the heroin. He snorts some of it and dumps the rest down the toilet right before the plane hits turbulence and crashes. He has a buzzed haircut, but it's shaggy and messed up in the first season. He also runs past Rose to get to the bathroom in the original timeline, whereas he doesn't this time. When Jack tries to resuscitate Charlie, the pen in his pocket is missing because Kate stole it when she bumped into him outside of the bathroom. But remember in season 1, the pen is still in Jack's pocket on the island, as he uses it to make an incision on Edward Mars, who's injured. We see the outside of the plane as it's closing to land, and it doesn't have a blue belly, whereas the original plane does. In the first season, the Oceanic logo on the front section of the plane cuts into 3 blue stripes on the side of the plane, more than it does in the Flash Sideways timeline. The flight lands at LAX without any indication that the plane lost radio contact or was off course. In season 1, as we know, Flight 815 lost radio contact and was over 1,000 miles off course towards Fiji during the time of the crash. Charlie is arrested, whereas he isn't in the original. He tells Jack that he was supposed to die. Okay, that's the end of all the differences on the actual plane flight. Now I'm going to be talking about all the differences in the airport. At LAX, Jen is questioned at customs, and Sun is referred to by her maiden name, Miss Puck, likely meaning Jen and Sun are not married in this timeline, whereas they were in the original. Also, Jen and Sun aren't wearing wedding rings at this time, whereas they were the first time around, which also shows that they aren't married. Sun doesn't appear to know English this go around, even when Jen isn't there. We know that she knows English in the original timeline, but she could know English and just be hiding it again. We just don't know. Kate goes to the bathroom, and after knocking Edward Mars unconscious, she doesn't even care about the Halliburton case and just leaves it there. Remember that in the original, Kate was extremely interested in getting the case since it contained the toy airplane from her childhood friend, Tom. Oh, and a separate thing here. When Kate and Sawyer are in the elevator, we can hear the police code 341, which means discharging firearms. Not sure what that's about. A company representative tells Jack that his father's coffin apparently wasn't put into the plane in Sydney, and they are uncertain of its current location. Locke also is told the same thing about his bag of knives. In the original timeline, both the coffin and the knives crash onto the island with them. Jack and Locke bond, and Jack tells Locke that nothing is irreversible, referring to his paralysis, and also a clue for us. Okay, now that's all the differences I could find, but if you found any more, let me know down here in the comment section. Now, after the several minutes of showing what the differences were, the big question is, why was everything different, and why did it seem to change? Some people are thinking that the two timelines here seem like a representation of the famous Schrodinger's cat paradox. Now, this paradox is pretty confusing, but I'll try to get the gist of it out there. The producers are simultaneously revealing the events of the two timelines, as they would result from a single event, being the detonation of the bomb and its interaction with that pocket of special energy at the Swan. According to Erwin Schrödinger, The consequences of a random event can lead to both outcomes simultaneously, until that is, the event is observed, and the true outcome can become reality. The producers have mentioned in the past about a magic box, and when you open it, whatever you want to be in there will be. This could be a metaphor for what's happening, similar to the Schrodinger's cat paradox, offering two possibilities and only allowing one to exist once the box is opened. Another idea is to remember the teaser video posted a couple years ago of the orchid orientation video during Comic-Con. In it, we see that Dharma had accidentally created a duplicate rabbit. Maybe this is why Juliet said that it worked. They created a copy of themselves at the point of the accident. One flew on towards LAX while the other crashed unaffected. That's just another idea. But whatever it is, we know it's an alternate reality and not just a reset. And I think Desmond's going to play a big part in finding that out. Okay, so now that I'm done with the flash sideways, I'm going to be talking about everything that happened on the island. And I'm going to break this part up into two separate parts. The first one being with the group at the statue, and the second part being the group at the temple. Inside the statue, Ben wonders why Jacob didn't fight back. The Nemesis replies that Jacob must have known he was beaten, and asks Ben to go outside and tell Richard that he needs to talk to him. Remember, Ben still feels like he has to do whatever Locke asked him at this point, because he still thinks that the man in black is actually Locke, and his daughter, who was the man in black / Smokey, told him he had to do whatever Locke says. When he goes outside, Richard shoves Ben down to Locke's real corpse, so he can see that the guy he was listening to isn't actually Locke. 4 of Alana's men, including Bram, take some guns and go inside Taoret. They fire several shots at the man in black after realizing Jacob was dead, with one shot appearing to actually strike him. Flock disappears behind a column. One of the men finds the bullet on the ground, and the Nemesis reappears as the smoke monster, like I talked about last week. And he owns the noobs as they struggle to put ash around them. Bram does though, and we see Smokey can't penetrate the invisible wall it somehow creates, like the sonic fence. Remember last week I talked about how in other cultures, ash is used to keep evil spirits out. The monster knocks a rock into Bram, and as he falls outside the circle, fatality. Ben cries in the corner like a little girl when the man in black / Locke reappears right behind Ben and says, "Sorry you had to see me like that." So why was the Nemesis sorry Ben had to see him like that? Well, I personally don't think he is sorry for Ben, but for himself, because it took away the ability for him to manipulate Ben based on Alex's instructions, which means he can't control Ben anymore. Ben asks him, "What are you?" And he only answers that he's not a what, but a who. Flock then tells Ben that the real John Locke was very confused when Ben killed him, and that his last thought was, "I don't understand." He also says that Locke's only redeeming virtue was that he was the only one of the Oceanic 815 survivors who didn't want to go back to their worthless pre-island life, but rather wanted to stay on the island. Then he reflects on the irony of the situation, because unlike the real Locke, the Nemesis just wants to go home. What's home for the Nemesis, though? Well, Robert tells Rousseau that it's a security system guarding the temple. That would make sense that the temple would be its home, because, as we see later, all the Jacob followers in the temple get freaked out when they learn that Jacob's dead. Maybe they know that it means that the man in black is coming to the temple, or its home.